What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we'll be doing another live fantasy football mock draft. But before getting into it, another quick reminder, if you haven't already, go ahead, get yourself a copy of the 2019 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It's got everything you could possibly want: overall rankings, individual rankings, player bios, scoring for standard and PPR formats, general fantasy advice, and much more at a great value. Like I said, only $5. Check out the description box for everything you need to know on how to get yourself a copy. But now let's go ahead and dive straight into this mock draft. Like I mentioned, it is on Yahoo. It is a 12-man half point PPR league, as the standard scoring format is here through Yahoo, and we're drafting out of the third spot. Now, there actually is a reason for that, because I want to put myself in a situation where I could potentially have three high-end RB1s after the first three rounds. As you can see, I selected Alvin Kamara with my first pick, so that's already done. That's taken care of. We've got that first high-end RB. That's why I want to be within the first four picks. And honestly, I do think when you are in this range, you kind of go ahead and allow yourself to have a shot at a guy like a Dalvin Cook, maybe a guy like Todd Gurley, maybe someone like Leonard Fournette in the third round, maybe someone like Damian Williams. And I think all those guys, maybe some riskier than others, obviously, but they can be high-end RB1s. I think that's a very good way to make your roster stand out from others. And to me, this is the best range to go ahead and do this in. Now, I will say this is not going to be a zero wide receiver type of strategy where you see me go running back within the first 4-5 rounds. That video will come later on. Don't worry. This will kind of just be for an exercise within the first three rounds, how things play out, and then how the wide receiver situation looks like. On top of that, let's kind of look at these other picks. You saw Barkley and Zeke went before. I drafted Kamara, then Christian McCaffrey, as you would expect, Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon. Then I anticipate we are going to see that run on wide receivers after DeAndre Hopkins got selected 7th overall. And that's right around the range where you're going to see the wide receivers start to go, maybe 7th, 8th, depending how people feel on guys like Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon, a James Conner, a Joe Mixon, a David Johnson, who went here at number 9 after Devontae Adams was drafted. I've seen David Johnson go as high as the 5th pick overall. I can't blame people too much, but I'd rather have Melvin Gordon above him. I'd rather have someone like DeAndre Hopkins or Devontae Adams potentially above him. That's not to say I don't think he's a first-round pick. We've talked about it before. What the Cardinals have done in the draft, I do think that has elevated his stock to a first-round pick. So after David Johnson, let's look at some of these other picks. Michael Thomas, somewhat surprising to me that he was selected above Julio Jones, considering that New Orleans offense is more run-oriented. But after Julio, Odell Beckham, to me, that's way too early for OBJ. I think he should be a mid-second round pick. I think you should be drafting guys like Joe Mixon above him, guys like potentially Juju Smith above him, maybe even Antonio Brown. You see Todd Gurley here go in the early second round. I thought potentially he could make it to me back towards the end of the second. I was hoping for that at least. I was hoping Dalvin Cook would make it back to me. We will see what happens. Maybe a guy like James Conner falls. Maybe someone like Nick Chubb falls. Not the biggest Nick Chubb fan, considering Kareem Hunt will be returning to that Cleveland backfield. We'll see at what point it becomes a value pick, however. So we've got 2 picks until our turn. And just looking at the best available running backs, Derrick Henry is still there. I'm not touching him no matter what. I'll tell you that right now. I just have zero confidence in that Tennessee offense. I don't think they're going to be scoring enough points to make anyone fantasy viable. And considering that Derrick Henry pretty much got 50%, if not more, of his fantasy production within a span of 3-4 weeks last season, that doesn't have me that excited. I'm going to go ahead here and draft Nick Chubb. I've said before, I've gone on record and said that Nick Chubb, I think he's going to be a big risk. And the best thing to do if you go ahead and draft him is kind of to, trade for him within the first 4 or 5 weeks when he builds up, that kind of production. And then before people realize it, Kareem Hunt starts to take away his touches after that suspension ends. So that's what I would do with Nick Chubb. Obviously, this is a mock draft. I would approach things a little bit more cautiously, probably, if this was the real deal. But again, just for the purpose of kind of putting together a roster with some high-end running backs, that is the mindset here. So after, let's go ahead and go back to this draft board. Take it back even a little bit further. After that Dalvin Cook pick, we saw a guy in Travis Kelce go, then Antonio Brown, then James Conner, Juju Smith, Mike Evans, George Kittle, Nick Chubb, who we selected, then Zach Ertz, Amari Cooper, Aaron Jones, earlier than I expected. I'm going to go ahead here and select Leonard Fournette. He is my next highest rated running back. I think he's going to see a real uptick in terms of his usage as a pass catcher. I think he's got high-end RB1 potential. The only other guy here I contemplated was Damian Williams. I just think Leonard Fournette will get a higher usage. I think Nick Foles being added to that offense will go ahead and introduce some stability. Hopefully the Jacksonville defense also rebounds and gets you, a lot of scoring opportunities for that offense in turn. But right now, I think we've done a decent job of staying true to the strategy that we mentioned beforehand. 3 rounds, 3 high-end RB1s, depending how you feel on Nick Chubb and Leonard Fournette. I think for the sake of this exercise, they all fit the bill here. So let's kind of try and strategize about some of these wide receivers that we could potentially target. You see Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen go after that Leonard Fournette pick, Derrick Henry, Keenan Allen dropping down to the 31st overall pick. I think that is extremely good value, middle to the end part of the 3rd round. Damian Williams also dropping, great value for him. AJ Green, Marlon Mack, Patrick Mahomes going with the second to last pick in the 3rd round. I'm kind of trying to eye these wide receivers. Maybe a guy like, if I'm extremely lucky, Julian Edelman will fall to me. I'm looking at someone like Alshon Jeffrey. That's probably a little bit more likely. Devonta Freeman is still there. Kerryon Johnson is still there. But I'm going to try, obviously, address the wide receiver position because, like I said, we did a very good job of drafting 3 high-end running backs with our first 3 picks. So wide receivers is the way to go here. And even speaking of those guys, they already went. You see Devonta Freeman, Kerryon Johnson being selected after Robert Woods, who went after Patrick Mahomes. So, obviously every single platform is going to have different player positional rankings. Don't be so discouraged maybe if you go ahead and draft someone 3, 4, 5 spots earlier than what one platform has them ranked as, because from platform to platform, let's say a Leonard Fournette may be ranked 30th overall, just throwing out a ranking like that, but in another one he might be ranked 25th overall. So ultimately it's going to come down to how you feel about that player, the projections that you have for him, and how confident you are in him really putting up those good numbers to carry your team at that position, analyzing the offense he's in and the opportunities that he will have. But here you kind of see this run on running backs. We saw it here with the last couple of picks after Devonta Freeman, Kerryon Johnson, Josh Jacobs. Then we saw Brendan Cooks, Sony Michel, Kenny Golladay, Andrew Luck, Mark Ingram. Would have loved to have had a chance to select Kenny Golladay. He was another guy that I would have targeted. And we got our wish because Philip Lindsay right now went with the 45th overall pick. Julian Edelman, look, he's not a wide receiver 1, but he is as consistent of a wide receiver 2 as there is in the league. He is the favorite target of Tom Brady. He's pretty much the only viable wide receiver that the Patriots have left, unless you count James White, who plays running back. But right now, this is shaping up great. If this was the real deal, if this was my real draft, I'd be pretty happy about this. Obviously, there's some points as far as question marks are concerned, but we can address those later on. Right now, Julian Edelman is our first wide receiver. I'm pretty happy about it. Let's look at some of these other guys. Chris Godwin just went, then Chris Carson, Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake's a guy that I really like. I think in later rounds, again, depending on where you see him being targeted and drafted in your mocks, I think he is a great value pick. I think he's the biggest threat that Miami offense has. I think he's really going to see an uptick in rushing opportunities now that Frank Gore is gone. So someone to keep your eyes out for. Alshon Jeffrey here is, however, the guy I'm going to go with. Cooper Kupp, also considering him. Go ahead, flip the coin. I just went with Alshon Jeffrey. Cooper Kupp right now, we just still don't really know the status of his comeback from his injury. That was the only reason I kind of went with Alshon Jeffrey. Other guys that we could have potentially considered: DJ Moore, Jarvis Landry, Sammy Watkins. Definitely wouldn't have gone with Sammy Watkins. I don't think he is a viable option. Maybe a Tyler Lockett, who went one pick after Alshon Jeffrey, but I do think Jeffrey has a higher ceiling when it comes to passes going his way and the amount of receptions he actually finishes the season with. So for that reason, I do like Jeffrey more so than Tyler Lockett, and even more so considering that the Seattle Seahawks are a run-first team and the Eagles are a pass-first type of team. After Tyler Lockett, you see Aaron Rodgers, Tariq Cohen, Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, so that run on quarterbacks a little bit. I think right now we're in a great position. Honestly, we've taken care of our running backs, of our flex position. We've got two pretty good wide receiver twos with Edelman and Alshon Jeffrey. At the most important position in fantasy, the running back position, we have got good depth. So I think we're sitting really pretty right now, to be honest with you guys. We'll go ahead and address the tight end and quarterback position later on. We'll see what is available for us when we get to the 6th round at the turn. You see James White go here, Jarvis Landry, DJ Moore. Cooper Kupp still available. I think it's an indication that other people are also kind of just avoiding him because of the injury situation. But I don't think there's any chance in hell he's going to make it back to us at the 70th pick overall. I'd be stunned if he did, and he would be my selection without a doubt there. Other guys that I'm looking at, Calvin Ridley potentially. I'm also looking at a guy like a Tyler Boyd, who is ranked 70th overall per Yahoo. Looking at some other options here: Matt Ryan, Sterling Shepard. I've been on record saying how high I am on those guys. I would consider an Evan Ingram here as well. I'm not going to lie to you. I think he does have, that high-end tight end potential. I'm starting, the more and more I think about it, to have him above O.J. Howard, above Hunter Henry. To me, he is that 4th tight end right after George Kittle. So we'll see if he's still there for us once we get to that 70th overall pick. If Cooper Kupp is still there, I'll go ahead and grab him. Tyreek Hill was just selected. He's an interesting pick at 65th overall, so in the middle point of the 6th round, because the reason he's interesting is, his situation is still ongoing. He's still meeting with NFL officials. I personally think that, he still will receive a suspension, and he probably won't be viable for a very long time in this fantasy season. But again, another player that we just have to be patient with and just see what happens. So for that reason, right now, someone that I am avoiding after Tyreek Hill, unfortunately, Evan Ingram went, then Eric Ebron, bit of a reach if you ask me, then Mike Williams. That's all right, though. Look, Cooper Kupp is still there. I'm going to go ahead and grab him. I think when healthy, he's not a bad option. I told you I would have considered him in the last round, so to me, he's a logical choice here. Obviously, if he isn't picked with the 69th pick overall, which might happen if we've gone to auto pick with this individual. Nope, he went Sterling Shepard. Not a bad pick. I like Sterling Shepard, but I do like Cooper Kupp a little bit more so. So I'm going to go ahead, grab him there. And I'll grab another wide receiver in Tyler Boyd if he is still available. With our first 3 picks being running backs, it makes sense to go ahead and load up on some wide receivers. In case your first couple of picks at that position don't hit, get yourself some backup options. Cooper Kupp, not a bad one. Tyler Boyd, if he makes it to us, I think also a viable choice. We'll see what the situation is. Maybe, like I said, if not Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley. I really like those second-year wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, highlighting the bunch. So we've got 2 picks until our turn. Darius Geis, Tavon Coleman being the next 2 picks there. I do think Coleman will be a guy that ultimately wins out that San Francisco job. He will have his fantasy value rise as we get closer and closer to the season, but that'll be the case for whoever wins that spot. I right now do think it'll be Coleman. So we are one pick away from potentially grabbing Tyler Boyd. We'll see what happens, but either way, we'll either have Calvin Ridley or Tyler Boyd. So right now, my preference is Boyd. We will see what happens. However, I'm looking at Matt Ryan as a potential guy here, but he was just selected, so that's out of the conversation now. We'll go with Tyler Boyd. I think Matt Ryan is going to have a great season. I think him and Andrew Luck ultimately end up battling out for the regular season MVP, and I think you can't go wrong with either quarterback selection there. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's look at the quarterbacks that are still left. You see Cam Newton, Kyler Murray, Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, Big Ben, some of the big names. I personally have Carson Wentz above Kyler Murray. Cam Newton's an interesting guy. I could potentially just go ahead and get Carson Wentz to couple him with Alshon Jeffrey. I like to go ahead and get that quarterback to wide receiver, preferably quarterback to running back stack. That's the one area where I kind of make an exception of getting two players from the same team. And I do think, like I said, Carson Wentz will have a very good year. He is somewhat of a sleeper guy that I think can get you very good value at the quarterback position later on. So let's go back to all these players. And after Tyler Boyd, we saw Christian Kirk, Latavius Murray, Calvin Ridley, Lamar Miller. It would have been nice to go ahead and potentially get Latavius Murray as a handcuff to Alvin Kamara, but that wasn't the case. It's all right. I think Tyler Boyd was a much better value, so I'm not too worried about it. And let's kind of label out some more players. We talked about the quarterback. Let's look at tight ends. We've already filled out 2 bench spots, and I think this is shaping out to be a pretty nice roster. I'm not worried about the bye weeks. I don't think it's not something that you guys should worry about either. But again, it's a conversation for another time. Pretty much, go for the best available player. That's always the case. So don't sweat the bye week. That's small stuff. So we are into the end of the 7th round. We saw Sammy Watkins go. We saw Marvin Jones go. Jared Cook. To me, he would have been the next best available tight end. So I'm just going to do here a move that I've grown accustomed to making. Let me accidentally clicking on the quarterbacks there. Go to tight ends and queue up Greg Olsen, who to me, I think as long as he stays healthy, I realize that's a big if, he is going to be a borderline top 5 tight end. When healthy, he is without question the favorite weapon for Cam Newton. He's the most reliable pass catcher there is on that offense. He's a threat in the red zone. I love everything about Greg Olsen when he's healthy. And again, with some of these people having left the drafts at this point in time, you're going to see defenses, you're going to see kickers kind of go. So we'll start to wrap this thing up as well. Queue up our quarterback, queue up some other backup options on the bench. We've got Carson Wentz. There he is. We'll add him to the queue. So he will be our next target. Looking at a guy like, kind of scrolling down here. Let's see where someone like a Mecole Hardman is. He's probably going to be lower and lower down the list. Ito Smith, Miles Sanders. I really wonder where someone like a Darrell Henderson is here for these Yahoo rankings. Let's go ahead and check that out. Running backs, and kind of scroll down this list. Yeah, he is way low down there, 157. I've seen him go in the 5th round in some mock drafts. So again, that's a situation where it really varies from platform to platform. I'm gonna go ahead and queue him up, though. I think he's another good selection. I realize I don't have Todd Gurley, but that doesn't mean we can't invest a pick in Darrell Henderson. To me, he's going to be the backup there. Just think about it like last year. Even if you didn't draft Le'Veon Bell, you could have still taken a flyer on James Conner. If you did, boy, did that pay off. So I treat this as a similar type of situation. You saw Cam Newton go. Here is speaking of quarterbacks, Corey Davis, Kyler Murray, the Rams defense, Golden Tate, Jerick McKinnon. And I'm going to go ahead. We are back on the board and get my guy in Carson Wentz here at the quarterback position and start to round out this roster. So we've got Carson Wentz, Julian Edelman, Alshon Jeffrey, Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb. Tight end still empty, Leonard Fournette, Kupp, Tyler Boyd. And again, I realize I'm reaching here, but just for the sake of completing the starting roster, I will draft Greg Olsen. And then we can go ahead and wrap this thing up, kind of analyze the roster itself, and give it an overall grade. So we'll see what happens. I doubt Greg Olsen will be selected here within the next couple of picks. We saw David Njoku go, Deshaun Jackson go. Let's go back to the overall player ranking list. So you see Will Fuller, not a bad option. If I was actually in the long run of things going to make it throughout this entire draft, he'd probably be my next selection. But we're going Greg Olsen, so now we can go ahead and analyze this roster. So starting with the quarterback position, Carson Wentz, I think he is a great value pick that a lot of people are sleeping on later on in drafts. I think he will be a quarterback one. Julian Edelman, Alshon Jeffrey, I realize we don't have a true wide receiver one, but we have one of the most reliable high-end wide receiver twos in Julian Edelman. Alshon Jeffrey also can fit into that category, but where we really, really stand out is the running backs with Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Leonard Fournette. We've got Greg Olsen, who again to me is going to be a borderline top 5 tight end. Cooper Kupp, Tyler Boyd, so we've got some wide receiver depth as well. Let me know what you guys think about this. Do you guys think going 3 running backs right from the start is a viable thing to do? I realize, these rankings are going to change as we go forward, but for now, it seems like a viable strategy. I think it is. I'm really heavily considering doing this in some actual leagues. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think the roster becomes too uneven? Or is this something that you guys think has validity to it? Along with any other questions you guys might have, let me hear it in the comments section. And as always, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in future videos.